Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are diving into the literal science of movement, kinesiology. We're going to look way, way beyond the surface level of sports and physical education to see exactly how movement governs almost every single facet of our daily lives, from our internal psychology all the way out to our broader society.
Okay, let's kick things off by challenging a stereotype you might actually remember from middle school. If you ask the average person what physical education is, they probably picture standing around in monitored recess, or, maybe a mildly traumatic game of dodgeball. But teaching movement actually requires a highly specialized set of scientific skills. It is an incredibly complex discipline that literally shapes how we interact with the world around us.
So here is our roadmap for today. We're going to move from the classroom to the mind, out into society, and finally to all aspects of human life. We'll be covering the science of pedagogy, the mind-body connection, sports as a social mirror, leveling the playing field, and finally, the 7 spheres of movement. Let's jump right into section 1, Beyond the Gym Stereotype, the Science of Pedagogy. There is just a massive gap between that old lazy gym teacher myth and the reality of modern physical education. That old stereotype of a teacher just rolling out a cart of basketballs really earns the profession a bad name. But in reality, modern educators navigate incredibly complex dynamics. They have to adapt to huge variations in pre-existing skill levels, manage limited equipment, and work to develop a student's kinesthetic sense. And that's basically a person's fundamental understanding of how their body is positioned and moving in space. So this brings us to a pretty crucial insight. Being a world-class athlete absolutely does not automatically make you a great teacher. This is where the science of pedagogy comes in. It's the method of how things are explained and exactly why that method is used. Think about it. An Olympic heptathlete might be a phenomenal competitor, right? But without pedagogical education, they might fail completely as a coach. Why? Because doing is not the same as teaching. Teaching requires deep content knowledge paired with the pedagogical skill to instantly modify a drill the second a student starts struggling. Let's bring this to life with a practical example. Imagine a teacher with a really large class and, say, very few soccer balls. The easiest but honestly poorest pedagogical choice, a full field 11-on-11 game with just one ball. What happens there? 2 kids play and 20 kids become completely bored bystanders. Instead, a modern educator actively divides the field, creates small groups of 3, and releases them in waves to dribble down smaller sections. This simple pedagogical shift ensures every single student gets dozens of touches on the ball. They're actively developing their skills rather than just standing around on the sidelines. Moving right along to section 2, the mind-body connection, sports psychology. It's wild to think about how our understanding of movement has evolved alongside human history. The inclusion of physical education in academics actually dates all the way back to 386 BC, when Plato included wrestling at his academia. But the psychological component didn't really formalize until 1898. That's when Norman Triplett published the very first sports psychology paper. He made this fascinating discovery. He noticed that bicyclists actually pedaled faster when they had a competitor right next to them, compared to when they rode alone. As our physical understanding grew over the centuries, our recognition of the mental and societal impacts of sports grew right alongside it. So, to manage stress and push past those mental performance barriers, sports psychologists use what's called mental skills training, or MST. This includes things like self-talk to direct attention and mindfulness to keep athletes grounded in the present. But the most fascinating technique has got to be imagery. One famous study looked at whether visualization could improve basketball free throw accuracy. The results were honestly mind-blowing. Mental visualization yielded a nearly identical improvement to physically shooting free throws every single day. The mind is quite literally shaping the body's capabilities. But, to get an athlete or even yourself to actually practice, you really have to understand what drives human behavior. And that comes down to extrinsic versus intrinsic motivation. Extrinsic motivation relies on external rewards, things like trophies, money, or praise from others. But sports psychologists aim to foster intrinsic motivation. This is that pure internal love for the activity itself. It represents the ultimate form of motivation because it's completely self-regulated and driven by a desire for personal growth rather than just outside pressures. Which brings us to section 3, sports as a social mirror, sociology. Sport has the power to change the world. It has the power to inspire. It has the power to unite people in a way that little else does. It laughs in the face of all types of discrimination. Nelson Mandela's powerful words here remind us that sports are not just games. They are highly dynamic social and cultural activities. They serve as a mirror that reflects societal factors like politics and economics, while also acting as a catalyst that can completely alter perceptions and promote real systemic change. To really study this impact, sociologists look at physical activity through 5 distinct lenses. Functionalist theory looks at how sports maintain social order and build community. Just think of how a local football team unites an entire city. Then there's conflict theory, which examines economic forces. For example, how sports like golf or sailing require expensive equipment, which subtly enforces class divides. Critical theory investigates how sports create or reinforce social hierarchies and media representation. Feminist theory focuses heavily on gender dynamics and equal access. And finally, interactionist theory looks at how individuals shape their own identities through daily, on-the-field interactions. Each of these theories offers a really vital perspective on human behavior. Section 4. Leveling the field and the massive impact of Title IX. It literally took just 37 words. Written back in 1972 by Senator Birch Bayh, those 37 words of Title IX entirely prohibited sex-based discrimination in any educational program receiving federal financial assistance. Now, this legislation wasn't just about getting women onto the playing field. It mandated equal access to training programs and educational facilities, fundamentally challenging traditional societal norms, pretty much overnight. And the sociological impact of this cascaded far, far beyond the gym. Before Title IX in 1972, only 44% of bachelor's degrees were awarded to women. But consider the massive societal shift since then. By the 2019 to 2020 school year, women were vastly outpacing men, earning 58% of all bachelor's degrees. It is just a stunning example of how feminist theory in sport and educational policy can drive massive, measurable cultural change. Let's round things out with Section 5, the 7 spheres of movement, integrating physical activity into life. Researchers Brusseau and Knudson actually categorized physical activity into 7 distinct spheres: self-sufficiency, work, education, self-expression, health, leisure, and competition. This framework basically proves that physical activity isn't just some weekend hobby. It is a holistic requirement for human life. It extends far beyond the walls of a fitness center and weaves right into the very fabric of how we survive, how we play, and how we learn. Let's zoom in on just one for a second: the sphere of self-sufficiency. This is all about maintaining the ability to live independently. Kinesiologists categorize this into ADLs. Those are fundamental personal care tasks like dressing and eating, and IADLs, which are slightly more complex demands like grocery shopping or shoveling snow. Occupational and physical therapists use this exact framework to design rehabilitation programs for aging populations. They're helping them maintain these critical daily tasks to preserve their dignity and independence for as long as possible. Or consider the sphere of self-expression. We often forget that basic physical gestures are completely central to how we communicate without speaking a single word. Emblems are specific body movements directly translated into words within a culture, like giving someone a thumbs up. We also use illustrators to complement our speech, and regulators, like nodding our head to guide a conversation. Our physical body is constantly broadcasting our emotions to the world, whether we realize it or not. So from the intricate pedagogy of teaching a kid to dribble a soccer ball, to the psychological power of visualizing a free throw, to the massive societal shifts triggered by civil rights legislation, kinesiology truly is the science of human life. Knowing that movement impacts your mind, your society, and every facet of your independence, the only question left is which sphere of physical activity will you activate today?